When you train in real life, first of all, you can cause damage, right? You don't want to train when you're connected to that VPN and you have access to perhaps a production environment that is real. Training in real life is error prone.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 233. Upskill your knowledge using Wilco. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darren and Victor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darren reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Victor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darren Pope and Victor Farson. Victor, school has been back in now for a few weeks. I'm assuming your child is off and happy?
It's off. She's off now. Happy is, it's cool.
So she's back in school. All the colleges are back in school. But why aren't we back in school, Victor?
I'm not back in school. What are you talking about? I successfully avoided school even when I was supposed to go to school.
Okay, well, that's fine, but it's a different conversation. What should we be doing? Shouldn't we be getting better at our skills so our job can be either easier or better? I mean, okay, let's go ahead and get AI out of the way. Shouldn't we learn how to do AI the right way?
We should figure out how to escape the company wherever we are and get a better job somewhere else. And that means learning all the time.
Learning all the time. On today's show, we have On Freund on from Wilco. On, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Wilco is, you could say training, but let's not say training. Let's say it's for upskilling. And strangely enough, it looks like you do it through text-based games, or at least part of it. Is that semi-correct?
That is indeed semi-correct, both the semi and the correct. So Wilco, in a way, is kind of like a flight simulator, but for software instead of aviation. So we build this simulated environment where you can practice your craft as a software engineer. And you do that by running through scenarios that you would run through in a real-world experience. And through that, accelerate the pace in which you're gaining said experience.
Wait, when you say real-world experience, do you mean like I have a laptop with a VPN from an enterprise that does not allow me to do almost anything?
Well, that's part of the problem that you want to avoid in training, right? Because you have so many limitations in real life. When you train in real life, first of all, you can cause damage, right? You don't want to train when you're connected to that VPN and you have access to perhaps a production environment that is real. Training in real life is error prone. But that's just one problem. Another problem with training in real life is that it's very slow. You can only practice what you actually encounter. And you can't necessarily make up the scenarios that you want to practice through at a given pace. And there are other problems, access and opportunity, your ability to get to the right mentors, get to the right problem sets in order to gain experience. And a simulated environment kind of takes away all of these. And in the same way that I mentioned the flight and simulator analogy earlier, in the same way that you can't really practice the crash landing on the Hudson in a regular flight.
So it's like practicing in production without touching real production in a way.
Yes, in production, in a real company setting, with make-believe colleagues and a make-believe production system.
So with a simulated environment, I can safely blow it up, rewind back to one, and try not to blow it up again.
Accurate.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Why would I want to do that?
Why would you want to do it? Well, first of all, it's fun. So I would encourage you to do it regardless of whether you want for other reasons. But you mentioned earlier, shouldn't we strive to be better at what we do? Shouldn't we try to learn more, to gain more skills? And that is exactly the reason. I think that software engineers, at least most of the software engineers that I've met in my career, and I've met thousands of them by now, all have this intrinsic motivation to become better at what they do, which is great. And then most employers I've met also want the team to be better so they can become more productive, build better systems. So I think everyone's interests are kind of aligned on practicing and gaining more practical experience.
Seems like practicing would make it easier to actually do real rehearsals. I mean, that's practicing rehearsals, the same thing. Typically, we don't get the chance to rehearse because we're always chasing fires.
Yeah, I was about to mention that. From my experience, it is true. All employers want people to get better, as long as that is not clashing with the deadline. And, as long as you do everything else, I want you to be better.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But you know what? Developers are already spending so much time on training and developing or professional growth that you can do it without actually affecting deadlines. So unfortunately, I don't have recent numbers, but the last survey I know was published sometime in the 80s. And they claim that software engineers spend about 19% of their time on actual work. So if you assume that the other 81%, some of it is obviously coffee breaks, bathroom breaks, but I would guess that a huge chunk of it is dedicated to professional development, whether it's through side projects, reading blogs, listening to podcasts, or anything of that sort.
You forgot the most important one, meetings. Endless meetings.
Well, I don't know. I don't know enough about the methodology of that survey and whether meetings are considered work in that sense. If they'd asked me, I would say some do make sense. Like if you're agile and you're doing sprint planning, that's real work. But a lot of other meetings aren't the real quote unquote work of a software engineer. And it is important to put it in quotes because, I don't think the real work is just about writing code. In fact, the opposite. I think a big part of what makes Wilco unique is the fact that we leverage and train those skills beyond code writing, which are harder to practice.
How did you come up with the idea for Wilco? What's your background that said, I need this?
So I've been writing software since I was about 8. Always been a passion of mine, eventually turned into a profession as well. But most of my career was actually spent managing engineering teams. And when managing engineering teams, I was on the employer side, constantly looking for ways to give my team more experience, to accelerate the pace in which they're gaining experience. And like Victor said, without affecting deadlines. And I came up with this idea of doing an evening class where kind of like case studies in business school, people would go through those case studies of engineering and within months gain the experience of years. I pitched that to a few boot camps. They all said that it's a great idea, but they want to focus on 0 to 1. They don't really care about 1 to 2 or 2 to 10 or 10 to 100. And then sometime towards the end of 2020, I realized that I just left WeWork and I realized that I want to do this, but I thought that I'm going to do this as a passion project. I'm going to start my own school and I just wanted to break even. I want someone to run the daily operations of it, but I think it should exist. And I pitched it to a few people and I spoke about it to a friend and former colleague. And he told me that I'm stupid. So I asked him why. And he said, well, you're going to get 6, maybe 10 students per class. You're not making a dent in the universe. Let's figure out a scalable way to solve this. And by the way, another former colleague of ours and a good friend is also thinking about the same space. So let's get the 3 of us together and brainstorm. And that's what we did. And each one of us came into this brainstorm with a slightly different idea of how they want to support upskilling of software engineers. I came with this idea of a school. One of us came with this idea of simulations. The other one came with the idea of we want something scalable. And eventually we landed on this game-like experience that, like I said, is kind of like a flight simulator.
So boot camps wanted to go from 0 to 1. Where do you want to be? Is it from 1,000 to infinity?
Sort of. I think the infinity remark is a really good one because we all want to become better, and we can all become better regardless of what our current level is. And in fact, the more experienced you are, the harder it is for you to find those experiences or those scenarios that you can actually develop from, because everything you do is kind of like been there, done that. So it's definitely to infinity. Where do we want to start? I would say we want to start at the point where you know your way around code. We don't want to focus on teaching you to write code. We think that there are enough resources out there to help you do that. We want you to be better at what you do, and writing code is just one skill out of many, which in fact some might argue not as important, definitely looking into the future.
What are some of those other skills if we're not coding? Assuming that study was true, and basically people are only working 8 hours in a whole week, what are they filling the other 30 hours with?
So first of all, it's a combination of hard skills and soft skills. Soft skills usually revolve around communication, but there are different types and styles of communication. Writing code is a form of communication, right? You want to write code that communicates well to the person who has to maintain it afterwards, whether it's you or whether it's someone else. Comments within the code are a form of communication. Slack messages, design reviews, definitely code reviews are a form of communication on both sides. So those are a family of skills that you want to practice. On the hard skills, you have system thinking and things like understanding security implications and performance implications of your work. Understanding how systems break, what causes them to fail. Debugging skills or problem solving in general. These are just a few examples out of so many that you can train for.
If people are having a hard time figuring out where to start with in the soft skills, where do you recommend?
Well, my biased opinion would be start with Wilco, right? But I think the first part of it is finding the communication patterns that you like around you. One of the things that people often miss is that they want people to communicate with them in a certain way, but then they sort of fail to neglect that, they neglect that or fail to notice it when they communicate with others. So first of all, find the patterns that you think are right for you and try to lean into them. Figure out how the senior engineers on your team, and when I say senior, it doesn't mean that they write better code. It means that they drive more impact. Find the way those senior engineers communicate, and are they able to achieve more through the use of their words compared to you. But then last but not least piece of advice, if you're a software engineer, there's a good chance that you know software sometimes better than people. So start with the communication patterns within the code, figure out how you make those more streamlined, how you make those more respectful of the people who actually consume that communication, and then gradually expand to the human realm.
That I assume also includes communication through written text, documentation, what's not, right? Because more and more of us are working remotely, more and more of us are distributed across the globe. That means that we are less speaking directly, real time with people, right? And more relying on offline communication in a way.
Yeah, and then we're missing out on a lot of the nonverbal cues. So for example, we're recording this, but we're also looking at each other as we're recording, which gives us a lot of additional information, sort of side channel information. And when you reduce from speaking to text, that's even worse. Sarcasm might not be interpreted accurately when it's in text, right? And sometimes it's harder for us when it's not our native language. Some people feel more comfortable speaking in a language that's not native for them. Some people feel more comfortable writing text in a language that's not native to them. So many nuances of different communication channels. And you're right, we're switching a lot of what we do to text-based. Emails, documents, instant messaging, but also code reviews. Back in the day, I remember people looking over my monitor screen to do a code review, and now it's through text over a pull request or whatever your platform of choice provides.
That might explain a lot of my problems because I don't comment my code. So therefore, I'm just writing code. So nobody can figure out what I'm thinking.
I have a beef with that. I believe that actually good code does not require comments. The worse the code is, the more you need to comment to explain what the heck is going on over here.
So you said what, and that's a great point. I think the best comments are why, not what. So sometimes there's historical information that's missing from the present, and adding a piece of why comment can really make a difference. But I try to avoid the what comments and make my code more readable.
This is a getter for first name. Completely useless. Why we need a first name is a different conversation.
Exactly.
So you started creating Wilco back in 2020, is that correct?
Early 2021. So the first brainstorming was January of 2021.
And here we are coming up towards the end of 2023. So you're getting close to being almost 3 years old. You are in the toddler phase. You're out of diapers, but you're a toddler right now.
Terrible twos.
What has the terrible been for you during this process? Thinking at it from, you've basically, I'm assuming you've bootstrapped, or have you taken any funding?
We've taken funding. We're VC backed. I think, if you look, I don't know when people are listening to this and what year into the future they're listening to this, but you should know, dear listener, that the second half of 2022 and then all the way throughout 2023 so far has been an economic downturn that has been mostly affecting tech companies. And that's obviously something that, as a tech company that produces a product for tech companies, is affecting us in both directions. So that's a hard thing that we've had to deal with over the past 9 to 18 months. But just like every other company, we've also had our share of growing pains. I don't think anyone is immune to that, whether it's growing too quickly, growing too slowly, making bad hires. And when I say bad hires, it doesn't necessarily mean bad people. It sometimes means people who are not right for the stage that you're in. I've been through my fair share of all of those.
In the past 2 years.
And throughout all my life.
And throughout your life. Well, okay. We won't go down too deep of a rabbit hole, but you were at WeWork.
I was at WeWork.
And did you stay through till the end, or did you get out before the end?
Well, it depends on
I'm
what you
air
mean
quoting
by the
end.
Yeah.
Before the public chaos started ensuing.
So the public chaos was summer, fall of 2019. I left WeWork a year after that, in fall of 2020. So I've been through the rise and fall. I joined in summer of 2014. We had just a dozen buildings. I think my employee number was something like 114, which means the team was smaller than that because there's obviously some attrition. And it was a very different company than what we became towards the end of 2019. And that was even a very different company than what we were at the end of 2020. I wouldn't take anything back. I got so much from that experience, but it's been a handful.
How did that inform what you're doing at Wilco now?
In so many ways. So, first of all, like I mentioned, I felt the pain or the need for something like Wilco throughout my career. And that also means my tenure managing the engineering team at WeWork. But so many different things about building a company, building a culture, the type of message that you're sending to the world, the conduct that you want to instill at the company. So many different things are different at WeWork compared to Wilco. And so many things are actually things that I took from WeWork that I thought went great and I'd love to replicate.
What were some of those great things that you wanted to carry forward?
WeWork, despite rapid growth, was really focused on bringing in the best talent possible. And that's definitely something I'm trying to do at Wilco. There was a lot of conviction at WeWork. A lot of us really believed in the mission, which could be cynical about WeWork's mission or about a tech company having a mission in general. But I thought it worked really well at WeWork and kept everyone aligned. And Wilco itself is also a mission-driven company, and I stand behind it. And it's something that almost every Wilco deck, whether it's an update to employees, to investors, board, whatever, starts with our mission.
What is that mission? You're setting me up right now. It's just
I know.
like one thing after another here. That's
The mission is to empower every developer, regardless of their background or skill level, to unlock their full potential.
so by unlocking a full potential, that means I get to play games.
Well, it's the other way around. You get to play games to
okay.
unlock your full potential, not unlock your full potential so you can play games. But if you want to do that, that's fine too. I'm not going to hold it against you.
That could be my true potential, for all I know. Play games.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. You have the chair for it. I can see.
So you've been building out Wilco, going on 2.5 years now. What is the actual? Let's pull the covers back if you don't mind, and you can tell me no, that's not good. How is it constructed? I mean, what has it been like to? Okay, you took funding, great, that helped probably get you some bodies that you really needed. I'm assuming that was a big part of it.
And souls.
And souls, bodies and souls. Good. Both are important. What is this really constructed out? Is it, hey, I've got some Perl scripts running and everything's great, or what's it like?
Perl scripts. No, we decided to write the whole thing in a combination of COBOL and Fortran.
Which flavor of Fortran?
94, I think. 91. What is it? 94, 91?
91 was a good vintage. Yeah.
No, so it's a modern stack. But the nice thing is because we support different platforms on Wilco, you can train in a platform of your choice. That means that our code itself is actually available in so many different languages. So even though the platform is built on one stack, the content is replicated in a lot of different stacks. And we also have this engine that kind of allows us to write a quest. We call the pieces of content quests, by the way. It allows us to write a quest once and then have it available in every stack that we support.
Going through the site, there's a big link called Build a Quest. So I could build my own quest?
That's correct. Not only can you build your own quest, you can actually use Gen AI to build a quest for you, and that's even faster.
What is your take on AI in all of this? Because I'm still, my famous phrase is old man shaking fist at sky. How big of a deal is AI, especially in the space that you're in upskilling?
I think it's a huge deal, both in terms of its direct effect on upskilling and training and education, but perhaps more importantly, on what it means for our field. So 5 years ago, everyone thought that truck drivers would be the next profession to be replaced by AI, right? Or robots. And now everyone seems to think that designers and content writers are the first professions to be replaced by AI, and then software engineers. So it turned from blue collar to white collar jobs. I think that Gen AI is not going to replace software engineers, but it's going to change the profession significantly and in a way turn it from a profession into a skill set. And what do I mean by that? I mentioned earlier how code is not the most important skill, but it has always been the skill that everything gravitates around. If you look at other types of engineering, civil engineering, electrical engineering, there is no single skill like writing code that seems to be the gravitational force for everything around it. And I think writing code has been doing a disservice to our profession in the sense that it has been scaring a lot of people off. People were afraid of becoming software engineers because of that code writing aspect. And as much as AI can take that part away from us, still keep all the other skills needed to be a software engineer, but take that code writing away, replace that with whether it's human prompts, whether it's something more visual, doesn't matter, but replace it with something more approachable. I think that anyone will be able to become a software engineer. And at some point, we might find that people become a software engineer on top of their current profession. So I'm a marketer who's building systems for marketing automation. I might call myself a software engineer.
Some of them do already.
True,
And
but
sometimes that's questionable.
Some of them do, but in the future, it might be accurate.
I think that there is a significant difference between being professional in something and using that something, right? There is a difference between me riding a car every once in a while and a truck driver doing that as a full-time profession, right? And the same thing, I guess, applies to your example. You being in marketing does not mean that you should never touch any code, right? More and more people are using code. Scientists are a good example, right? Significant percentage of scientists have sufficient Python skills to write something that is required for that job, but that's very different from being a full-time professional coder. And when we get to that level, there is a very huge discrepancy between writing the silly code that everybody else writes and writing code that matters. We probably 90% of the time write code that doesn't matter at all. It's, okay, I have a request coming from this web UI. I put it in, I set it to the database, respond back. That's a silly job, right? But when we do get to that, the things that matter, kind of improving Google algorithm type of stuff, then coding actually does matter a lot. It's just that it doesn't happen often.
Those are great points. And first of all, I've seen a lot of code written by scientists. I happen to be married to a scientist, and I've seen a lot of the code by scientists. And sometimes it's great code, but the products they build with it are usually not good products. And what do I mean by that? There's an algorithm that's running and doing its job, but then you only have one person who actually knows how to run the thing. And if you need to pass in any parameters, then you might have to do it through a file or something like that. They don't really build a product. They build an algorithm. And I think that in the future, they'll actually be able to easily build products. So that's one thing. And the second thing, you're absolutely right. Software engineering and coding are not going away. The fact that other professions are going to be able to do that as well doesn't mean that there's no room for the experts. But even today, none of us, to be honest, are probably doing what the software engineers of the 80s used to do, right? We're doing something completely different. But then there's a minority of software engineers that work on the web servers that power a lot of what we do. Yeah, and they might actually do something that's more similar to the type of low-level programming that existed a few decades ago, right? So I think that you're right. And I think that every time there's a leap in level of abstraction, we need to keep a layer of software engineers who are able to handle the layer below it. But that becomes a small layer. Not everyone needs to do it anymore.
It's sort of like the trades. We still need the plumbers that can go in and fix the thing, even though I can DIY and install myself. But when I mess that up, I still need somebody that knows how to do the thing.
Exactly.
For real.
Exactly.
So walk us through building a quest. I show up at trywilco.com. What do I do?
Well, you go on our developer page, and there you have the SDK. It's pretty simple, to be honest. Coming up with the content is tough, but once you have the content in mind, turning that into the form or the format of the Wilco quest is pretty easy. We also have example repos that you can take a look at. It's mostly a collection of YAML files, where each YAML includes both the communication with your virtual colleagues, the repos involved, the various steps that take place, and what it takes to get to the next step. I think it requires real skill to define a scenario, a real scenario, an interesting scenario, and make it one that people get something out of. But once you have that laid out, the mechanics of actually writing the quests are pretty simple.
Okay, two things. Number one, why YAML? Why are people so bent on writing everything in YAML? Victor, be quiet.
Well, it wasn't my decision, I don't involve myself in those types of decisions, but I will say, as a young consumer and writer, that it's one of the best blends I've seen of something that is both machine and human readable. JSON, for example, is way more verbose than YAML.
No, Darin likes XML. Okay. That's why he's asking.
Oh, wow. Okay. I think we can stop right now and cancel this recording.
Okay. Second question. You said the phrase virtual colleagues. And you just sort of just blew right through that. What the heck is a virtual colleague? I'm guessing that's part of the quest.
Yeah, so a simulated environment needs to have everything that you'd find in a real company. So you have a production-like system with logging and monitoring and analytics and load balancing and a real data set. But perhaps more importantly, you'll have colleagues and team leads and support people and all the functions that you'd find at a real company, and you interact with them. In a real-world scenario, you need to be notified of something happening, or you need to have tickets in your ticketing system to handle. You don't just go out and write code. That's not how things work. There's a development lifecycle. There are tools around it, and there are humans who seed those tools with data and or communicate directly with you. So it's important that those simulations capture that too.
I was going to try to say something smart. I'll still attempt it. Are we rolling D20s as we go through this quest, or is it fairly linear?
Wow. Such a good question. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a great question. I've never, at least never phrased like that. So being an avid Dungeons and Dragons player in my youth, I enjoy the reference. There's an aspect of interaction that is not 100% linear. And most importantly, you can do whatever you want. Even though the quest itself is linear, it's comprised of a series of steps. Let's take, for example, that performance problem in a production scenario I mentioned earlier. It is linear, but when you have to solve it, we're not dictating how you solve it. So we want to make sure that you know that you need to measure and you need to set a baseline and you need to compare against it. And you need a regression test suite to make sure that you're not messing anything else up while you're fixing that performance problem. But we're not going to look into how you solve this, because if the benchmark is running faster and the tests are running and passing, then we think you've done a good job. To be honest, even if you've cheated, it doesn't matter. You've learned so much along the way on, how to handle a problem like that. So it's linear, but there's a lot of room for you to play around with it. And especially when you interact with the other characters, your interaction is going to affect their communication as well, which I wouldn't say is rolling dice, but it is different than just something that's set in stone.
Do you always embed a Lumberg into the quest? Do you understand the
Actually, that I don't understand.
Okay. Do you remember the movie Office Space?
Yes.
Lumberg was the boss.
Oh, okay.
In other words, do you just have basically an NPC come through and it's like, do you have my TPS reports today?
So yes, and it's not necessarily a boss per se, and you're definitely not being asked for TPS reports, but those characters do interact with you. And when I say interact with you, they file tickets and they communicate over instant messaging or a corporate chat-like product. They have their own sense of humor, each one of them. So yes, there's a Lumberg in each quest. How
does this play out? Am I sitting on a web page? Like I guess I go to the quest, I start the quest, but then what is the actual mechanics of the quest?
So the unique parts of the interaction are through this chat-like product. That's where you communicate with the other characters. But you're using a lot of your own tools on top of it. So we provide you with a GitHub Codespaces environment that you can play around with. We provide you with a code repository for that fantasy company. And then you're going to use your IDE and you're going to use your command line and you're going to use your profiler if you need to, and GitHub or any other repository that you want to use, a ticketing system, anything like that, anything, whatever makes you happy or whatever you want to practice on. And a lot of what you're doing is going to look like the things you do in real life, just very focused and in a way that allows you to choose when and where you want to experience every scenario.
So how would I get started? Let's say I'm just an individual. What's my story like versus maybe me as an employee of a company coming in to try to do that? Like if I'm trying to upskill myself on the side because my company's too cheap to pay for anything, not even a book, what do I do?
Just go on trywilco.com and sign up for free and just start playing quests. We're going to ask you for your level, and then we're going to tailor the first quest based on that. And then from then on, it's going to be based on your performance and the quest that you want to play.
Now, if I'm a company that's wanting to provide the quests for my employees, what is that like?
As a company, there are various ways of tailoring or customizing Wilco to your needs. This could be anything from creating specific journeys, which are just a way to package existing quests into a series of progressing quests. You can build your own quests. You can integrate your own systems, and you can even integrate your own code base. One of the ways that I like recommending companies to work is basically whenever there's something major happening and you're creating some sort of postmortem document, instead create a postmortem quest capturing the events that transpired. And when you do that, first of all, instead of having a document that gets thrown into the archive the next day, you have something that people actually want to consume and experience again and again. And if you do that enough time, the organizational knowledge within your team is actually captured pretty well. And that means that if you join the team, then you can take this series of 5 quests that get you up to speed. And maybe you're switching from one area of the product to another. And here are the, 2 quests that are the delta between what you know and what you should know. Or maybe you're joining the on-call rotation, and here are the 3 most common scenarios that you'll encounter while being on call, etc.
It sort of sounds like, going back to your postmortem, that's a great idea. I see this with audio engineers. Like, I just watched a video the other day of the Iron Maiden audio engineer. Took the live recordings, and during the time that we won't mention the name of, he was sitting at home on his console, mixing the show live, because he had individual isolated tracks of every instrument, every singer, everything. So he's able to mix all of that down. So when they went back out on the road, it's as if he never stopped. So being able to take these types of scenarios and make them in a playback mode to where, and it's just not, I'm watching it go by in front of me, I'm actually interacting with it, whatever that might be.
Exactly.
So we talked about individuals, we talked about companies, but what if I'm a vendor? Like, I've got a product I'm selling to the world. This is probably pretty meta. How does Wilco actually do Wilco on Wilco?
Well, first of all, any new engineer joining our team goes through our onboarding track that is a mix of both existing quests in the public catalog and quests that are specific to us. You get to go through quests that, for example, practice our coding standards in setting up the actual Wilco systems and not just the fantasy system. But as a vendor, you can create quests that let people practice your product as well. So we already have in our catalog quests by companies such as New Relic, Mixpanel, Circle CI, and others. And through that, if you want to practice observability, why trust what the Wilco folks are saying? Why not practice it using what New Relic built? I mean, I'm sure they know what they're doing, right? And if you want to practice CI/CD, then the Circle folks know pretty well how to do that. So to me, it's kind of a win-win. As a person practicing, you get quality content developed by the experts. As a vendor, you get to highlight your product, whether it's just for the general community, but also you can create more custom tailored training and offer it to your customers or to your partners.
So how do you make money?
What's money? I don't get that reference. Is that like a 2023 thing? Because in 2021, no one was talking about that.
That's WeWork's influence over there.
No, just kidding. So we have our customers are a combination of teams that use Wilco to train internally and vendors that use Wilco to train their customers and their partners.
So all of this information that we've been talking about can be found at trywilco.com. On, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.